Okay, welcome listeners. Thank you for tuning into the AFC Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Victoria Fragnito. Say hi, Victoria.
Hi, Victoria. That joke's not going to get old at all.
Today
we're actually going to...
Podcasts deep, and we're going to get bored with that right away.
Today, we are going to be joined by Nicholas Ferracamo. Actually happens to be my fiance. He's going to talk a little bit about his production company, Cinema Veritas Productions. He's going to be telling us about what projects they have coming up, what they've been working on before quarantine, and all of that happy jazz. And he's asked both Jim and I to watch the movie Predestination, a very interesting thriller sci-fi that was an indie movie from Australia starring Ethan Hawke. So we'll talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, I personally love sci-fi movies. So when we were coming up with what movie we should be talking about, so far we've talked about sports drama, we talked about Rocky, we talked about what was the other one?
We talked about Logan, and we talked about Goodbye Girl.
Goodbye Girl. It felt like we're starting to hit some genres, so let's pick something that we haven't done yet. So we went with sci-fi. I love sci-fi. I'm a huge nerd, so anytime something sci-fi comes up, anything involving time travel also blows my mind when it's done right. This movie blew my mind, and then blew my mind again by the end of it, because there's two major twists. And if you're listening to this, go watch the movie. Pause right here. Go watch the movie and come back, because we're going to delve into some spoilers, I'm sure. Yeah. But sci-fi movies in general are just really fun when they're done the right way. I recently also watched one of my favorite sci-fi movies, Arrival. That movie is all about language and the aliens. They come to Earth, and there's 12 spaceships that land all around the Earth, and they have to figure out a way to communicate with us. So they land, and they're just not saying anything, they're not doing anything. So the people wind up going onto the ship, and they have to talk to the aliens, but the aliens don't understand language, they don't speak English. So it becomes all about how do we communicate with each other. And they wind up teaching each other English while the aliens are teaching the humans to speak their language, all through writing and symbols, and they basically make an alphabet. It's a whole thing. Such an interesting movie. That's probably my favorite sci-fi movie, if I had to pick one right off the bat. Victoria, what's your favorite sci-fi movie?
So it's not that I don't like or like sci-fi movies. I mean, to me, sci-fi movies were always like the Star Trek movies or the Star Wars movies. So I don't know if I have a particular favorite sci-fi movie. I mean, Star Wars counts as sci-fi, right?
I think. I don't know. It's definitely. That's tricky, because it's, technically then we could say superhero movies are sci-fi movies, because they're doing all these science fiction-y stuff. It's a loose genre. I think Star Wars does, I'm sure, fit into it, because it's all space fantasy. I would say Star Wars is maybe more fantasy, a space fantasy.
Yeah. I would say, like, when I think sci-fi, I end up thinking of actually my favorite TV series, which is Battlestar Galactica.
That I would say is probably, Star Trek, sci-fi, they're pretty, Battlestar
Galactica is an amazing, incredible series. I'm kind of upset that they're rebooting it again. I think the reboot they did in the early 2000s was perfect. They don't need to do it again. But I mean,
watched most of that back the reboot when it came out, and I liked it. I think I eventually fell off of it. I'm not sure why, but I did watch quite a bit of it. It was cool.
So that's immediately what I think of. I know when Nick was going through his choices for what sci-fi to give us, because Nick has watched so many more movies than I ever have, he was picking out sci-fi movies, and he was like, "Have you watched this one?" And I'm like, "Yes, you made me watch that one, and I didn't like it." Yes,
you guys have DVDs, because you just went like this, holding up your hands as you were picking out the DVDs from a pile of movies, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like his taste in movies. Predestination really blew my mind a little bit. Um, I gotta say, I don't know. I mean, I would consider Terminator to be a sci-fi movie a little bit, but that more is like an action sci-fi movie. I mean, they
See,
time travel. Anything time travel, I'm kind of immediately put in the sci-fi genre.
well, I mean, even this movie, even Predestination, when you look up how it's categorized, they consider it a sci-fi thriller. So I feel like sci-fi isn't just, it's always sci-fi something, like sci-fi fantasy, sci-fi thriller, sci-fi mystery. Like it's a bunch of it
That's true. I've
crosses
never
over.
seen a sci-fi movie that's just a sci-fi movie specifically. It's always a thriller or a sci-fi something else. It's always sci-fi action, sci-fi thriller.
I mean, I don't.
Um,
Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a pretty straightforward sci-fi. Um, but it's a classic. It's Steven Spielberg. It's Richard Dreyfuss. All of those elements together should work for me. But I wasn't. Maybe I just missed. I feel like a lot of times when Nick introduces me to films, I feel like I've missed that critical time period where it becomes like ingrained in my heart and in my
yeah,
soul. Like it's thinking of watching it back in the 70s when it first came out, it had to be mind blowing. But I feel like I might have missed the time frame to watch it and really appreciate it in the way that people
yeah.
seem.
A lot of that, I'm sure, too, has to do with, I mean, similar to special effects. Like, if I rewatch Jurassic Park now, the original, I'm still blown away. Like, how did they do that? They must have
Yeah,
really taken the time and all the stuff that they did, special effects wise, CGI wise, and actual physical effects. That stuff is mind blowing to this day. It still looks real, and
yeah.
to see Jurassic Park do it in what year did Jurassic Park come out? And then there's movies 92, 93. I was maybe, yeah. To see that movie nail it to where I still today am like, that looks real. And then movies everywhere in between then and now butchering their CGI and their effects and just making the worst stuff. Like the first thing I think of is The Scorpion King with The Rock.
Yeah.
Which would we consider that a sci-fi movie now?
I mean,
Not really. It's more of a, I guess, fantasy action movie.
science. Yeah, that doesn't have to sci-fi science fiction. So it doesn't really have anything to do with science. So I
That's
would guess
true.
that would be the fantasy category. But you're right. I feel like as soon as they started becoming wholly dependent on CGI, like they jumped into it way too quickly. I feel like, like when you watch the Mummy Returns, where the Scorpion King was first introduced, and you get to the end of that movie where they have to fight the Scorpion King to control the underworld army. When
You know a
that
lot about the Scorpion King and the Mummy. Jeez.
Scorpion King, I watched that one in the theater when I was in 7th grade because it was just a movie that we could all go to and like pretend to be on dates with our boyfriend. But I don't remember a single thing about that movie because I think it was terrible. But I
Sucking
love the
face with whoever you are on a date with. I see. Forget the
no,
Rock. Forget the Scorpion King. That's not why I'm here.
yeah, sucking face. It's more like sitting there chewing like multiple pieces of gum, hoping that he'll lean over and kiss me. Kind of the entirety of that film. But
And then that whole movie is such a turnoff that nothing happens.
yeah, it was terrible. I'm gonna blame it all on The Rock and the Scorpion King.
Right.
But
That's the Rock's fault.
But anyway, we digress very far.
Yeah, I mean, back into sci-fi movies, I love movies like Blade Runner is another really big one that's huge. They did Blade Runner 2049 recently. Those movies are amazing. Anytime where you're like, this is a mind fuck, I feel like that goes into sci-fi a little bit because the things you can tell, the stories you can tell in the sci-fi universe, they're unlike anything else you can tell in a drama because there's other things of other worlds, things that science maybe can't explain. And, people always, I think, are rational, so they try to rationalize whatever story is happening. So you can rationalize a story pretty easily, about a down-to-earth drama about a family or something like that. But when it's about spaceships and it's about aliens coming down and interacting with human beings for the first time, it's much harder to rationalize that because there is no comparison. There's no aliens that we've met so far, I think. Who knows? We could have a Men in Black situation. There's just aliens running around, and Will Smith is wrangling them. Would we consider, is that a sci-fi?
I would say so.
A little bit. Men in Black.
Pretty much anything that has to do with other worlds could fall into the sci-fi category. Like Men in Black, definitely. Independence Day. But yeah, Men in Black. I love the original one. That's a classic.
I love Men in Black for what it is. Even the new one was pretty fun. I liked it with Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, and they're a pretty good duo from the Thor franchise as well. Those movies are fun. It's definitely like fun, in your face kids type of movie, but still had a great time. It's still a good action movie. It's fun. A solid B movie. Avatar is probably one of the biggest sci-fi adventure action movies. Mind-blowing. Got 3 sequels planned already. I
have to say, I was underwhelmed by that film.
Really? I was blown away when it came out, but then the rewatchability of it kind of faded as I watched it a couple of times.
I mean, essentially, to me, I know other people have obviously made this comparison. It's Fern Gully made with real people and CGI effects, essentially.
It's a little bit of Pocahontas in there. And
right, it's a story that we've all kind of, like, the basic of the story is, a man is sent on a mission to infiltrate another society to get what his people want. And then he ends up, falling for someone and falling in love with the culture and being ingrained into the culture and brought in. And now he's fighting on their side. That is a story we've heard 50 million times in multiple different ways. And I just didn't think, like, while the special effects were great and everything, I was just underwhelmed. They made such a huge deal about it. I think had it not been built up for me so much, I would have liked it a lot more. I don't dislike it. I think it's, but
it's possible that its success kind of made it more intimidating, and your expectations are really high up, and that can kind of lead to problems in the industry when you have such high expectations. Like, I know myself personally, being a huge nerd, as you can see, I go to movies like Avengers Endgame and I'm blown away. My expectations are high, and then they're met, and then they're surpassed. And then you have movies that come out that are the in-between all the Avengers movies, where they're pretty good. Most of them are pretty good. Some of them are great. Some of them are okay. You have the duds like Thor, The Dark World, that kind of sit there at the bottom of the barrel in terms of those Marvel movies. But I mean, when you go in expecting something, and those movies, I guess, are easier to expect something because they keep having the same characters returning. They keep revisiting the same characters in different stories. So you kind of expect, like, oh, this is a Thor movie. I know what I'm getting myself into. But at the same time, that can hinder it a little bit, because when you expect something, I guess that can kind of be said for spoilers too, which we can talk about a little bit, I suppose.
And the opposite direction, I think sometimes when you're expecting something to be so terrible and you watch it anyway, then a lot of times you're pleasantly surprised that it's not as bad as it had been. Like when we watched, what is it? Justice League. I had such an idea in my head that this was going to be so bad. And I actually enjoyed it. It was fun. It wasn't like, mind-blowing because we had seen this done already. Yeah, we've seen it done already. But because, there was all this negative press and all of these changes behind the scenes, with Zack Snyder having to leave and Joss Whedon coming back in and all of that stuff, I think I was so expecting it to be an awful, have to fight through a watch. And it was actually a lot of fun. It was a fun superhero movie that I wasn't expecting. So I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I
You
thought.
close your eyes and you grit your teeth, you can really enjoy Justice League. I mean, no, that movie.
How do you feel, Jim? How do you feel about it?
I didn't hate it. That's the thing with superhero movies too. A lot of it is sometimes you hate parts of it. I can hate a part of a movie, but then love other parts. Probably one of the most conflicting movies that I've ever seen is Batman versus Superman, because there's parts of that movie that are so good. Like Batman breaking into that building and beating up 40 dudes. That was the greatest Batman fight scene I've ever seen in any movie. It was just choreographed so well. The stunt guys are all amazing at what they do, and they really made some amazing stuff out of that movie. But then there's other parts of that movie that I want to cry when I watch it because it's so bad.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a movie where simultaneously it's both one of my favorite movies and one of my least favorite movies. So it evens out at like a 6 out of 10 or something. But I don't know. I mean, some movies have amazing parts, and some movies are overall altogether pretty solid. I mean, I feel like Predestination was pretty steady the whole way through in terms of the fact that it was a very good movie all the way through. There was a little bit of predictability, but we can get into that a little bit later. Okay, so let's show a sizzle trailer from A Gift of 65 Roses. Victoria.
So back in 2015, we shot a sizzle trailer for The Gift of 65 Roses to kind of give people a taste of what a full feature film of the 65 Roses would be. So this is featuring Ryan Gilreath as Rich. It's featuring Nicholas Ferracamo as Joe, and a couple other faces that we hope will still be involved with the project, but it's an ever-growing process. So we'll see what happens.
You may not believe me, but when you take a hard look at things, most folks settle on life. Day after day working long hours at a job they hate. 50 weeks of hard work to enjoy 2 weeks of vacation. Spending time with their family. But can't wait to be left alone. Convincing themselves that they have met the one. No one else will do. One on a planet of billions. That ignorance can be bliss, but can sink someone if they allow it. Now, what if you knew when you were going to die? Would you quit that job? Take a chance at doing the thing you convinced yourself you couldn't achieve. You spent more time figuring out how it wasn't possible than putting an honest effort forward. Well, not anymore. Today you can change that. Still visit your family on Sunday? Maybe you go more now. Doesn't seem like a chore knowing the days are limited. They don't know that. But you do. So you make the time, happily. What about the girl you love? You actually stay with her? Or do you accept that you are shallow? Let her go and have no ties? Tell yourself it's for her own good. It's better this way. Or maybe you figure out that what you have is special. The little details. Moments you never realize at the time, but remember the most. Now, what if I told you I know when I will die?
I think for now, maybe we should take this time to rope in our day player. Normally, we would Zoom chat them in and rope them into the Zoom chat, but luckily, we have a little insider info as to where this guy is right now.
Yeah.
Victoria, why don't you intro our day player and bring him in?
So this is Nicholas Ferracamo. Say hi, Nick.
Hello, everybody. I'm not doing what you guys do. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Nick.
So Nick is the co-founder of Cinema Veritas Productions. He's an actor and a writer. And Nick, if you could tell us a little bit about Cinema Veritas and how you got started.
Cinema Veritas was the brainchild for me and Artie Vincent. We worked together on I was the lead actor of a couple of his shorts. We worked really well together. And then we just decided to start a company, Cinema Veritas, and then see where it goes and start, we had an idea for our feature. So that was before we even started the company. That was our goal, was to do the feature, but, we wanted to catapult the feature into something more. So that way we started a company to be able to do that, which was Cinema Veritas Productions.
Cool.
Nice. So about that feature film, why don't you talk a little bit about the history of that film, where you guys are at, where we're planning on moving forward with it?
So the history is pretty long. I'm going to try to simplify as much as possible. It started when I was at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts for Performing Arts. I started to write it and I finished it. And then it kind of I didn't know what to do with it. So I just sat there and did a reading of it, spent money, didn't know what to do, worked on the script. And then I went back home to Massachusetts for a while because I couldn't afford to live in New York for a little bit. Came back to New York in 2014. Talked to Artie. Was like, Artie, I want to make this film. After we talked, we were like, okay, let's make this film, but let's start a production company. So again, it was just I wrote it over 10 years ago, the original draft, which was terrible. Let me tell you, whenever you write, don't worry about if after you read the first draft and you're just like, this is horrible. If you believe in the core of it, you can work at it to make it something that you're really proud of. I had a lot of, the original script was terrible. I had people read it. I took those, recommendations and put them in the script. I constantly wrote. I've rewritten this script at least 50 times, and that's not even a joke. That might be lowballing it too.
Would you say it's a completely different movie from when the original script? Is it word for word?
The core is not. The core, the characters are basically not. That's the thing. But if you read the first draft into this draft, they go almost in the same journey, just they do a more interesting path through that journey. The scenes are a little bit more clear what they get across. The characters are a little bit more developed. And getting there from the arc is a lot more clear and a lot more interesting, hopefully, to the audience. At least it is to me at this point. The original one was just I wrote it down, just put it on paper, put it down, have it there, and then go from there. But it's a long process to get it to where you're actually okay, this is something good. But again, it was my very first script or anything, very first time writing at all. So I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I was just going. It was
it's all about the story that you want to tell. What is the story about?
So really, I'm not going to get too much in the specifics of it, but I'll tell you what's basically. I wanted to encompass the idea of, number one, the backbone of it has to do with cystic fibrosis, which I do have. It's not a well-known disease, but it does affect 35,000 people in the U.S. and it does affect 75,000 people worldwide, and that's just the people affected by it, and then let alone their families, whatever. And I wrote this when I was early 30s. So the life expectancy at that time was probably around 30 something. So, again, it's one of those things where you live with it every day. You're taking medication all the time. You're constantly reminded of it. And I kind of wanted to share that experience, that idea of having it, what it's like. And the film itself is basically about this this kid who has it. This, actually he's 30 years old, who has it, and how it affects the family. There's been a lot of documentaries about it, and it talks about physically. There's this movie's Five Feet Apart that really romanticizes it. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to really capture what it's really like. And at 30 years old, what it does to you mentally, physically, more mentally and spiritually and emotionally than physically, because that's already been done before. And then I wanted to really focus a lot of it on how does it affect the people around me, the loved ones, my friends, if you have a relationship, how does it affect that? So really it's about, it takes place within almost a year of what, this guy at 30 and his family, and especially his brother, go through while he has it. It's really investigating that. And I think, it's not just about CF, and that's the thing I want to get across. It's really about family. It's about a relationship between a brother, a father, a relationship between, a relationship with a significant other, your goals. It's about, I wanted to put a lot into it and then just focus on the CF aspect of it, because I think that's missing a lot of what, people with CF are just normal people, but we have something different and we have that to offer others. And I think I wanted to share that.
And actually, what's the name?
The gift of 65 roses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people are like, what's 65 roses? Do you have any idea?
I was about to ask, so what's the significance of 65 roses? I have no idea.
There's a small story, but beyond the story, I'm going to go to the ending of why the 65 roses. So, if you say cystic fibrosis fast as a child, it can come up as 65 roses. So it's actually, yeah. So a lot of kids can't say it. So they say when it comes out 65 roses. Mm-hmm. So that's where.
Now that you're saying that, I'm hearing it both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I like that title just because of the fact, unless you have, if you have cystic fibrosis, you know exactly what the movie's about. But if you don't, you probably have no idea and you're really interested. What does 65 roses have to do with anything?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It could also be a story too that it sheds a lot of light on the is it illness, disease? I don't know what you would classify it as, but it would shed a lot of light on it. And
it's
I think we broke up a little bit. Are we back?
Yeah, we're back.
Okay. It's probably something too that the film would be able to shed a lot of light on the disease and let a lot of people know what it's really about. Because I know I remember we had a chatter once or twice about the 5 feet or 6 feet apart movie, whatever that was, and how they kind of got it wrong and they romanticized and normalized it to a point where people were just like, oh, it must be really great to have this type of relationship. It's like, well, it's not. It's a very serious disease,
Yeah.
Well, I think what 5 Feet Apart kind of missed the mark on is, they made it like a Fault in Our Stars, Nicholas Sparks kind of situation with it. And the whole premise of that is, people with CF, COVID-19 or not, have to stay 6 feet apart from someone else who has the disease. Otherwise, they can cross-contaminate each other and infect each other and possibly put their lives at risk. So the movie 5 Feet Apart is about these two teenagers who meet in a CF clinic in the hospital and decide to take 1 foot back from the disease and live their lives 5 feet apart from each other because they fell in love or whatever. But what the disease ends up doing is, or what that film ends up doing is, it shows people with cystic fibrosis as in oxygen tanks and, all of this dramatic stuff in the way they live their lives. And unless you're at the very end stages, you're not walking around with an oxygen tank all the time. Not everyone with the disease is living like that. And it romanticizes a terminal illness. And
yeah, I was going to say, I don't see any tanks strapped to Nick right now. He seems fine. So,
well, Nick actually is rather healthy with CF, and not everybody is lucky enough to have that experience with the disease. Some people have it worse. Some people have it a lot easier. So it's just trying to shed some light onto different people's experiences.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
but
what's the current stage of The Gift of 65 Roses? Where is it at now, and where do we want to take it in the future?
So it's been a long time coming. We tried different ways to get funding. Funding is the hardest thing for any film, especially a feature film, because you need more money. We actually got approved for a 501c3 to see if we could get money from pharmaceuticals, especially that make millions off people like us, to see if they could give back. That was not successful. We've tried many different ways to try to get it. And now we're kind of like, we're at the, we figured a way to get the money that we needed. And then COVID-19 happened. So we were planned to do principal shooting this fall. But right now it's a 50-50 whether we do it. We haven't been able to go scout locations. We haven't been able to, we've cast some of the film, but we still have a few others, a couple of really huge parts to cast. We can't do that right now. We don't know if, say if this thing gets lifted in a couple months, maybe we could go do location scouting, get all that done. But then it's like, okay, well, the people that were going to give us money, investors or whatnot, sponsors, can they still do that? So right now it's on, we were planning on doing it in fall. Right now it's a 50-50 chance whether we actually do it. But if we don't do it this fall, we will definitely be doing it in 2021. But because of COVID-19, everything kind of like fell off the wagon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was kind of insane. It's been over, for me, it's been over 10 years. For me and Artie together, it's been about 5 years. We didn't start the company until about 2015. Mm-hmm. So it's been about 5 years. So we were excited to get this done, shoot it, move on, send it to film festivals, try to get distribution, get it out to, the streaming services somehow. That was our goal. Do well in the film festivals, small, medium, large ones, do well, get distribution, and move on to the next one. And I was hoping to, have it shot this fall. Now I don't know. It's either going to be it's either going to maybe this fall, but definitely next year sometime. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's not the only project that Cinema Veritas ended up having to put on hold because of COVID-19. Cinema Veritas had actually started a web series called Spare Room. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Spare Room was a brainchild of me and my coworker, Hunter Diaz. He's a young kid. He was he's 21. He's going to be 22 in July. And we just wanted to keep working. I mean, that's kind of the goal for all of us at this level, is just to keep working, just to keep doing projects, do something, instead of just sitting there hoping that one day something comes to us. Just go out and get it. So we wrote a web series. We wrote 2 episodes. Each episode is 15 minutes long. The premise was basically it's three guys, really. One of them is an older brother, which character I play, Jason. I decided to move in with my longtime girlfriend, and I'm a bartender, so I decided to buy the condo or the apartment. And I tell my brother and his friend, the 2 other characters there, that I'm moving out. But to be able to pay the mortgage and whatever else, you have 2 options. You can either find a permanent roommate, and split the rent 3 ways, or I can Airbnb that 3rd room out and give you guys a good discount because I'll be able to charge you more. So they decide to Airbnb the room out. So every episode is a new person coming in. Strange people, weird people, crazy people, whatever you got. So we got the first 2 episodes. First episode is explaining what the premise is of the web series. The second episode is the first person coming in, so you get to experience it. Like I said, we want to keep the episodes of 10 to 15 minutes. And the goal for me was I wanted to something I could always do. I play a character there that is reoccurring, but doesn't have to be in every episode. And I wanted to get different directors, different writers involved. I wanted to get more people, actors involved. If they had an idea, they can write it. If they want to direct an episode but not write it, direct it. If they want to direct and write an episode, direct it. I wanted to have more people involved in this. And the cool thing was the 2 actors there. There's an actual 3rd actor, a female, Erica, who Erica, Hunter, and Evan, which are the 3 kind of main characters. They all graduated from the same acting conservatory. And they were pretty close with their CEOs because they just graduated from their school, and their CEO was pretty close to them. So they were like, Hunter was like, let's talk to the CEO of my conservatory and see if she'd want to be involved in this. So we met with her and had a meeting, and she's like, I basically want to fund the whole thing. So she was willing to just give us money to do this.
That's a great meeting.
Reason was, yeah, and the reason was she's trying to help her alumni, instead of just spitting them out, which I thought was great, because every other acting school, they spit you out and they leave you alone. And then you're there to fend for yourself. She was actually like, I want to help my alumni do things, create things, help their career after they leave. So she funded 2 shorts, like $10,000 each. She wanted to get in the web series, which we were going to be the first web series. She was like, I was going to shoot the first 2 off our budget, off our cost, and then show her it, and then see what we can do for the future. And she was willing to do it. She was really excited. And then COVID-19 happened. So we released the episodes in April, first 2 episodes beginning of this month, actually. And we were going to contact her. Found out from Hunter that they basically refunded all the students' tuition for this semester, starting January all the way into the end of this year, like to the end of the semester. So that's a lot of money they lost. They were going to give us like $25,000 for however many episodes we can do for that much.
25,000?
Yeah, up to 25,000 grand.
Holy crap!
I don't know if she was going to
1,000 grand. Wow.
Yeah, but that's for multiple episodes, which is good because a 15-minute episode, 10 to 15 minutes, and everybody would get paid. And it would be great for everybody. We haven't heard from her much, just because of the fact I pretty much know losing that much money. I don't know if she's still doing it this year. I mean, we're gonna hopefully still shoot maybe for free for the next couple episodes, and then reach out to her next year when this COVID-19 thing is past and it's behind us. But I mean, we had a lot of things going, and kind of COVID-19 financially has taken a toll on basically all of our projects. So, I mean, even Victoria's plays are basically not going up this year on stage, at least. And, they were supposed to one way or another, and it's not happening. It's really taking a hit on projects you have. Now, the good part about it is you're home, you can, this is the time to write, this is the time to create. But to actually get it out there and done, it's so hard right now. And I don't know when it's going to, change.
Yeah. I mean, any film production or theater production, everything is a group endeavor. So that's the problem, is we can't be in groups right now. So it's kind of like, what do we do? Unless there's a way to do this at home via Zoom, but that's not really what the story you're trying to tell is. So it doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, waiting until COVID blows over is kind of the best thing.
Well, the thing is, in filmmaking, I've talked to many filmmakers, ones that have success, have had multiple films on, Amazon, done really good. We talked to the producer of Blue Valentine with Ryan Reynolds. We met with him and talked to him a little bit about, how do we go about making money? And when we told him about the 501c3 and everything, he was just like, I've never heard anybody doing that. He's like, if I was you, I would go the classic route of investor. Investors or sponsors. That's your class. And again, we were kind of like, oh yeah, Jack, we get it, but we're going to try something different. And to be honest with you, he was right. The way to go, as much as people want to try to scoot around, try to find different creative ways to get money, it's really the big ones are investors, sponsors, and obviously the lower tiers are grants and crowd fundraising. But to get a budget of like $100,000, $200,000, it's investors and sponsors. And now with COVID-19, investors want to make money. That they don't get into it. A lot of them don't get into it because they're like, oh, we love the art. It's like, okay, we want to know that we can make money off this. This is an opportunity to invest in something that maybe I'm not familiar with, maybe I am, but I want to make money. And it's hard right now because, where are we right now financially as a country? Are people willing to invest? And that's why we're like, even if this thing gets let off in June and we can go and scout and go all these places, will our possible investors still be interested in me saying like, oh, I want to take a risk on this? Because obviously investors want to take less of a risk. They want to go to the more guaranteed. They don't want to take a risk where I might lose my money. They want to go where, you know what, I'll at least make my money back and probably make a profit. And right now, financially, even if the quarantine ends, it's like financially, how are we as, you know, a country are we ready to invest? Are we ready to take chances on different things that we're not sure of? I don't know.
Yeah, everything is up in the air too. Not even just the film industry, everything, just the world in general is just kind of up in the air at the moment in terms of everything with coronavirus and COVID. The future seems daunting because of that, but let's talk about the past because the past is where it's at right now. Nick, how did you get into this field? What brought you to the film industry in the first place? Was it just a desire to tell stories? Were you an actor at first? What was the intro to the industry?
I mean, the reason you become an actor, you know, is for me at least was to, you know, tell a story, to live that story. I enjoy, you know, for me especially, acting is more of a thing where, you know, I get to live in that moment, you know, be focused totally in that moment. The more focused you are on the moment, the better, you know, actual performance you have. So in life, we don't ever live in that moment. We never do. But on stage, the more you can do that, and the more open you can be and vulnerable you can be, the better you are. And to me, that's humanity. That's the human condition. And that's what I love. So kind of theater and film kind of brought me to the acting. And then from acting, I mean, again, it's still storytelling. But what brought me into more film was like, as an actor, you get out of the school and you're just like, you know, you're auditioning for crap stuff. You know, commercials you don't give a rat's ass about that aren't deep. You're doing student films where most of them, 75% of them are just garbage. And you're just kind of...
Not anyone that's listening. Everyone that's listening, your student films are amazing.
You're the 25%.
25%. There's 75% more of you that are trash, but the 25% that actually listens to this podcast, you guys are great.
Yeah. So at that point, I mean, again, it was just kind of like, okay, you know, eventually I want to do film, and I always will do theater because my first love is theater. It was just like, I want to be able to have control over the content that I do, have a little bit more control over my own career. So that's when I was just, well, I'll write this, you know, I wanted to write that screenplay 65 Roses a long time ago, but then it was just like, let's start a production company. Let's take control of my own content. Let's take control of my own career. Let's take control of me instead of hoping I go on an audition and I get it and have it in somebody else's hands. And that's, I mean, even if you don't, you know, get an agent or get whatever, you're still working and doing the stuff that reason you did. I didn't do it to make a crap load of money and become famous. I did it to be able to work on stuff that I really believe in, to wake up in the morning and actually enjoy some of the things I do. And that's what I get to do. So, I mean, I don't mind having another job to be able to, you know, do this stuff, but I still get to do it. Regardless if I bitch that I have to go to my crappy job, I still get to go and do something like this. So write and create and do the web series and the feature. And so again, like that's how I kind of started off with acting and the reason for acting, and that kind of transitioned to like, really it's about storytelling, and that kind of transitioned to, you know, creating my own stuff on screen and on the stage. Because I did write my own play as well too, very first draft of the play, which, you know, eventually I want to, after this is all done, after 65 Roses is shot, kind of move on to that and try to get that out there. So, and then I also wrote a short. Remember I contacted you about that a while ago?
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that too.
So that was, again, me and Hunter, before we did the web series, we decided let's do a short. It's called Forced Perspective. You know, it was solid. It was kind of like a funny drama type thing. And again, we had this opportunity to, we approached an investor who was interested. But then he decided not to invest. He decided not to give money for us to do the short. Funny as it is, the guy who decided not to give us the money also gave $15,000 to an influencer to exercise at his gym and got nothing from it. So he decided he had a choice to decide to give to us the money or to give to this influencer to help promote his gym. And he gave $15,000 to an influencer, which in retrospect, he said was a big mistake.
Yeah, I remember when that happened and you came to me and said, so he gave $15,000 to this random hot chick to work out at his gym and she made like 3 posts about it and that's about it.
Yeah, got him nothing. Because eventually he wanted to franchise. And he has started franchising. He has started, but the people that are franchising are the people that worked out at his gym. Had nothing to do with her. So he basically just tossed $15,000 down the drain. And he's got nothing to show for it. Which, at least if he gave us,
you should call the influencer. Get the influencer to invest.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, that's another thing is trying to find the right person to invest. It's such the catch-22 of this field is just you want to create something and you want people to believe in it beyond the finances of it. But to be honest with you, when it comes down to it, people who are willing to have the money to do it want to do it to make money back. They're not doing it because they actually care too much about the content or too much. I mean, they have some type of interest in it, but the ultimate reason is, how am I getting my money back? What's my rate of return on this? What is the percentage I'm getting back?
Well, that is going to be most of the people that you go to for money. But, there are people out there that are interested in your project or, they've become involved in a project because it speaks to them personally. And it's just, those are just harder to find.
Yeah. They're rare.
They're rare.
Find one, hold on to it. Don't let it go.
Yeah.
Be very nice to that person.
Yeah. Please. Please.
I would say too, probably at least some of the people that are in that category, the limited maybe 5% of people that would give money, and probably half of them want to somehow involve themselves in the production and alter the story in some way, or my I have all this money, I can give it to your film, but my cousin has to play the lead role because it's
everybody. Even at the smallest, even if they're giving it to you and not investing, everybody wants something in return. Whether it's money, whether it's if you get a sponsor, they promote their whatever they want to promote. You got to promote it. Like you said, whether it's somebody who believes in it, but they want their cousin to be in it, or when you go, I want to be part of the red carpet. I want to be on the red carpet. Every screening there is, I want to be on the red carpet because I like that. There are people out there that like that. I want to be on the red carpet. I want to like that photography. I like that fame idea. And there's people like that. You just got to find out what they want, and try to provide that for them, whether it be money, whether it be the idea of fame, whether it be a cousin who wants to be a part of it,
Yeah. Sometimes getting the money is worth letting the cousin play the character or filming it.
It's definitely worth it.
Definitely worth it a lot of the times. A lot of people are so steadfast in their vision of what they want from their film that they are unwilling to make compromises when people say things like that, where they're like, well, I'll give you the money, but I want this. And they're like, no, I'm not compromising my vision because my vision's never been done before and it's perfect. And
again, there's a line. There's a line. Like if someone started making changes to the script, again, which a lot of studios do, but they're going to fund the whole thing so they can. But if you have control over your own content, somebody might come in and be like, I want to change this. And be like, I'm not. There's a line which you should be willing to be able to do. But sometimes some people will cross the line. You've got to make that decision whether or not you're willing to cross that line. Mm-hmm. Again, when a studio comes up to you and is like, most of the time, if they're not really connected to the piece, like, I'm going to give you $50 million to make it, but I want to have this scene changed and this scene changed, then you're going to do it. I mean, look at, like you said, you guys were just talking about Aquaman. The studio had total control of that. Nobody really had control of that. It's the studio because they're putting the money in. They want certain things, and you got to give them that thing, or they're not going to fund the money.
Yeah.
Fund you the film.
There's I don't know if you guys have seen the newest DC superhero movie, Birds of Prey, the Harley Quinn movie.
No, I didn't even see the.
So they, interestingly enough, with that movie, which is usually it's all funded by Warner Brothers through DC Films, all that stuff. They weren't willing to fund this movie because they didn't believe in a female-led movie like that wasn't Wonder Woman. They were like, Wonder Woman's our female thing, that's it. And they were just like, move on. Birds of Prey still wanted to happen, and Margot Robbie became the executive producer of it because she plays Harley Quinn, has her own film production company, wound up funding it herself. Basically, they went around Warner Brothers to make this movie because Warner Brothers was unwilling to fund it. So DC worked with Margot Robbie and her own company, made that movie. And I saw it and I thought it was great. And it's R-rated. It's a little more action-packed. It's a little more brutal. I thought it was fun. So different ways to get funding all the time. It just depends on who you know and how you can reach out to people. And sometimes actors want to make this story happen regardless, no matter what.
Well, now I think we're going to talk about Predestination. We're going to get into all of that. So we're going to kick you out.
All right.
But thank you for coming on.
Well, before you go, why did you suggest Predestination?
Yeah, you got to tell us about that.
Predestination I saw a while ago, and Ethan Hawke, first and foremost, is probably my favorite actor of this generation. I love everything, the choices he makes, the projects he works on. So anything that has him in it, I'm going to watch it. And I don't know, I think I saw it I rented it from Redbox or wherever a while ago, and I just was, the whole time, you don't know what the hell's going on. And finally, the ending, it just kind of brings it all together. But the idea, it's a science fiction movie, but there's really the human character to it. I love the idea of, you have a choice. But do you, or is it predestined that you're always going to make the same choice every time? And there's a lot of, other than the science fiction aspect of it, there's a lot of human aspects to it that I absolutely love. And I love that combination of science fiction with humanity in it. And then this thriller of what the hell's going on, murder mystery almost in it. So it had every aspect of what I look for in a film, as a story, as in the content that, and again, almost all of Ethan Hawke's stuff has something like that. I love that, man. I saw him live too, so. Some in True West with Paul Dano was phenomenal.
Another great actor.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Thank you for the suggestion, Nick, because I'd never seen it, and I watched it last night, and my mind was blown multiple times. So I appreciate the solid suggestion. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for talking to us about your projects and all the stuff that you have going on. And hopefully this COVID-19 nonsense blows over and all of those things can come into fruition because, there's nothing really holding us back once the world-ending disease goes away, right?
Exactly.
Thank you guys for having me. Jim, I was coming on here and listening to the podcast is the first time I've heard about Astoria's Film Club. So I've talked to Ari, and we really kind of want to get involved in that club. So I'll talk to you after this to see how we can get more involved in the club in the area, because I found it really interesting.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for having me on. Thanks for listening to me ramble about shit you might not give a crap about. But it was fun. So enjoy.
Bye.
Glad to have you. All right, let's talk Predestination. So did you watch this for the first time also?
Yes, like I said, Nick has seen so many more movies than I have. I have a feeling that through this podcast, I'm going to get a complete film education. Because I have a tendency to watch my favorites and stick with those.
Right. Why watch other movies if I already know the ones I like?
Exactly. Well, and I think so, especially with all of the quarantine and all of that stuff, I've been very wanting to stick with things that I find comfort in. So I tried, I feel like it was the wrong time. I tried starting to watch Game of Thrones, and that first episode was so upsetting that I haven't continued. But I think I'm sorry, did I hurt your soul?
Just thinking about Game of Thrones, I was rewatching it with family a little bit recently too. And I guess that's another thing about the expectations of what you're expecting something to come up. Game of Thrones built up for about 8 seasons. They built up this storyline, and in the last season, they did not capitalize on all the things that they built up, and it did not land for me, and it ruined the whole series. So now, even watching Game of Thrones at its best points, seasons 1 through 4 or 5, give or take, are probably all of its best points. It hurts to watch because I know eventually I will be disappointed by this. So just rewatching a show like that, and that's another thing too, just going back and rewatching something that you love because you love it. I do the same thing with Marvel movies. I do the same thing with a bunch of movies that I'm familiar with it. I know it. I rewatch The Office constantly. I rewatch Arrested Development all the time.
Yep.
But, you know, there's stuff with rewatchability, and then there's new stuff that you've never experienced. And Predestination is a movie that messed with my head a lot.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a new experience. I went into it not knowing a thing about it, so I was very confused. The whole opening part of the movie where they're in the bar, I was like, okay, they're kind of setting up this like weird sci-fi thriller, and they're in the 70s bar for like a long time talking.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the movie actually isn't that long. It's a little over 90 minutes. It's not super long, but maybe that's the whole time travel aspect of this thing. You spend so much time at the beginning of the film in that bar reliving the unmarried mother, reliving her past, or his past, I guess, at this point. And I was sitting there going, is this the whole movie? Like, what? And then it completely exploded and went off in a completely different place that I had no idea it was going to go.
Yeah, and I mean, any movie where there's a character that walks in, because the opening scene, there's a character and all their faces are cloaked. You can't really tell who is who. And then the character comes in, you don't see his face, and he does something, and I'm like, that's definitely one of the main characters. You know, you have to know it's like a twist like that, especially anything when they're like time travel related. But this movie managed to do that over and over again, which was pretty crazy, creating this weird timeline of all these different closed loops. And I'm trying to draw the diagram with my head right now, just with my finger, just all the closed loops in the timeline that don't make any sense to me, that you have to see the entire movie for it to make any sense. After I finished watching the movie, I looked up. Say again?
I was going to say, let's give a little background information on the film. So it's a sci-fi film. It's starring Ethan Hawke and Sarah Snook. It's based on a 1959 short story called All You Zombies by Robert A. Heinlein. It was directed by the Spyrig brothers. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong. They wrote the screenplay and they directed it. They had worked with Ethan Hawke previously on another sci-fi film, so they brought him in for this one. It was an independent film that was produced by Wolfhound Pictures and Black Lab Entertainment, and it was financed through Screen Australia. It premiered at South by Southwest in 2014 and was selected for the opening night gala of the Melbourne International Film Festival. So it doesn't look like it's an indie film, but it's severely independent.
Yeah. I mean, I looked up the budget for this movie. Budgets for movies always, you know, intrigue me because I'm always interested in how much it took to make that. And a part of that deal that they had with Ethan Hawke and those filmmakers was a 3-picture deal encompassing about $17 million, making the budget for this movie specifically $5.5 million, which if somebody's producing a sci-fi thriller, you got to be talking more money than that. So when I read that the budget was only $5.5 million, I was really blown away. I thought about it a little bit after that too, because if you watch the movie, it's very contained. There's not a lot of extras. You can probably count the amount of extras in the movie if you really went back and counted. Some movies are like, you have one shot of Manhattan and all of a sudden it's 40,000 people are in there. But this movie was really good at just keeping it very contained, very grounded. And I think it had to because of how big of a, you could really get lost in that time loops and all that stuff. So keeping it that grounded was, I think, necessary in order for us to understand what the hell was going on the whole time. The movie itself has a Rotten Tomato score of 83%. I'd probably give it a little bit higher than that, maybe just because I just watched it. Although I wouldn't go too much higher because I did find it a little predictable. But then every time I was like, oh, this is getting predictable, they hit me with another bombshell. So it was almost just like, psych, it is fucked up.
Yeah.
And it was nominated for multiple Australian Academy of Cinema and Television Arts Awards. It won Best Actress, Cinematography, Editing, Production Design, and it went on to be nominated and win multiple awards across Australia. Very cool. Didn't know all that. I've never heard of this movie. I'm guessing it was maybe it was filmed in Australia because all the awards are saying
yes.
it was in Australia. Yeah.
It was filmed in Australia. I know the Spy Rig, I'm not sure, I feel like I'm butchering their name. The Spy Rig brothers do try very hard to film in Australia when they can. So they tried to get a lesser known Australian actress, Sarah Snook, for the role of the unmarried mother, which is how they credited, how they were listed in the credits. Ethan Hawke was listed as the bartender in the credits as well, even though that's only like a third of the film is in the bar.
Yeah,
the rest of the film takes place over.
If you give too much away by saying this character is this person, you're kind of giving it away. But I mean, spoiler alert, we can start getting into the spoilery stuff here because we're heading in that direction. But basically, Ethan Hawke, his character is all the characters. Which blows my mind. He's the baby. He is the unmarried woman. He is the man who went with the unmarried woman and got her pregnant. He is the man who then becomes this time-traveling force, like sort of like time travel cop, and then gets his face blown off, and then his face changes, and now he looks like Ethan Hawke. And then it keeps going, and then eventually you find out, too, that not only is Ethan Hawke those three characters, but he's also the person that they've been trying to stop the whole movie, the Fizzle Bomber, all grown up. And it's just to show basically the entire lifespan of this person from when they were a baby to their adult life, as fucked up as their adult life was, all the way to the point where this person's now this bombing terrorist through time. It's pretty crazy to show the evolution of how all that happened and to show how that character is all of the characters.
When we got to the end and it's revealed, it's revealed little by little that Sarah Snook's character, born a female, grew up, went through this training program. The training program really threw me off. I was so thrown off by that because essentially she's selected to go through this training program that's billed as giving the astronauts, it gets lonely in space, so they were sending women up, I guess, to be people that the astronauts could have sex with while they're up in space, which that was weird. But
that's a whole sci-fi movie in itself. You could probably tell a whole sci-fi movie about just that because that's an interesting thing. But even though these were basically just NASA sluts, they had to be, well trained enough to go into space. You still need to be an astronaut because you never know what could happen in space. So they were still rigorously training women in science and math and making them, physically fit as well. And just that whole part of it kind of blew my mind. And then she gets through the training, and apparently at some point she gets into a fight with one of the people in the group with her. And while they're investigating the two people's wounds, they find out that the main character, the young woman, her character has both male and female genitalia, and that actually technically disqualifies her from this training that she's been undergoing for a very long time. And they don't really tell her why. They just kick her out, and she's kind of left to her own devices. And she picks up another job. She's working as a housekeeper. She starts working as a writer. And eventually, she bumps into this guy. And when she bumps into this guy is where it's kind of the pivotal, like, closed loop begins. Because the guy is actually her from the future. And all of the in-between for that is basically she bumps into this guy, and then the guy gets her pregnant and then leaves, disappears. He gets up and walks away one day. The girl then goes on, she has the baby. When she has the baby, the doctor says, look, you had the baby's fine, but we've discovered that you have both male and female genitalia. Having the baby kind of ruins your female genitalia, so we're gonna go with the guy genitalia to save your life.
Well, they gave her a complete hysterectomy, so she lost all of her female reproductive organs and hormones, and they're just essentially switching them out for what was already there. So she has to undergo, hormone replacement therapy and sex change therapy because that's what she has left.
Yeah, that's a whole fucking explosion of things to be told right away. And the actress was so good. Hearing this news, she's reacting to it exactly as I would react to something like that. Where, like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, the fuck? And then on top of all that, while she's undergoing all these surgeries to now become a man in order to not, die, I suppose. I guess that it was either like die or become a man. On top of all that, her baby is kidnapped or taken from the hospital by who knows who. And it just goes missing. So this woman now becomes a man and develops a career. He now, as a man, tries to go back to that space program as an astronaut, where I forget what happened. They just eventually disqualify them because of...
Well, yes. So Jane became John. John reapplied, and when they went through the physical, they have to go through physical examination. They were immediately disqualified, but the doctor was so intrigued by what was happening, they just spent a long time examining them. But they didn't end up getting qualified for the SpaceX program as an astronaut, which is because back in the day, women couldn't be astronauts. So now that he was a man, he was hoping he could do space flight, but it didn't happen.
Right. Still, this person is physically fit. She's smart. You're very smart. Qualifies in every way to become an astronaut, except that technicality of having both genitalia and that all those operations. But now as a man, John develops a career as a writer, keeps pursuing that, puts out a successful column, goes to this bar one night and meets Ethan Hawke, who is the bartender there. And basically that whole story we just told you, the bartender and her and John keep talking back and forth to each other. I'm trying to use the appropriate pronouns because at this point we want to be politically correct, but forgive me if I slip. So John is then talking to Ethan Hawke's character, who is unnamed, I believe. Does he even have a name, Ethan Hawke, at that point?
When I was reading articles after the fact and looking up, all the stuff about the film and its production, Ethan Hawke is referred to as Agent Doe, which goes back to when the baby was left at the orphanage and they called her Jane Doe. And so when you get all the way to Ethan Hawke's agent name is Agent Doe.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty crazy. So John basically tells the entire story of John's life to Ethan Hawke, and then Ethan Hawke is just like, cool, got all that. let's go be time travel cops. To which John is like, are you fucking kidding me? Basically, he poses the question and says, if I could put the person in front of you that got you pregnant and left you behind to do all this stuff, go through all these terrible things that you've had to go through on your own, if I could put him in front of you, would you kill him? And that intrigued John enough to follow along and go along with this. And also the desire to have a purpose in life, because at that point, John had assumed that his purpose was to go into space. Even through having a baby, all of that stuff kind of fell to the wayside of, I want to be an astronaut, I want to go into space. So having a purpose was really important to John. Goes with this Ethan Hawke character. Ethan Hawke basically then brings that person to the same time period. Well, what was it? The 40s?
1963. No, 1963. So
Right.
Ethan Hawke brings John to 1963, to the moment that when John was Jane, that Jane first bumps into that mystery man who she fell in love with, got her pregnant, and ruined her life. And when they get to that moment, John realizes John is the man that Jane bumped into. And they go through this whole cycle of John falling in love with the woman he used to be. They has sex with himself, creates a baby. I don't know how else to create.
It's so wild, and it immediately brings up Back to the Future, where it's like, is Marty McFly going to try to hook up with his mother? And
Yeah.
it's that, but it's even worse because it's John goes back in time and hooks up with the female version of himself, and then creates a baby. And that baby, as we know eventually, ends up being Ethan Hawke. They're all the same person. And
Yeah. At the very opening of the film, when Ethan Hawke is a time traveling agent, they're trying to prevent crime. It sounded a lot like, what was that Tom Cruise film?
Minority Report.
Yes, that's it. So it sounded a lot like trying to prevent crime before it happens. So Ethan Hawke this whole time is on the trail of this fizzle bomber who's who's bombing Manhattan and killing a lot of people. And at the very beginning, you assume it's Ethan Hawke is going to stop the fizzle bomber, gets close, really close, takes the bomb, tries to put it in this container to contain the blast, ends up, blasting his face, whatever, is unrecognizable, jumps back to safety in time, and has to have reconstructive surgery on his face. And when he's in the mirror, he says, I doubt even my own mother would recognize me. I remember him saying that from the end of the film, or from the beginning of the film. It's just so mind-boggling that you can go through this whole amazing story and start to piece together that all of these characters are one character, and then you get to the end and realize all of these characters are the same character. It's hard to even explain. It's just a complete, forgive the language, mindfuck.
Like for 15 minutes straight, and I feel like the people listening are probably sitting there going, what is this movie?
Yeah.
Essentially, there's all of these time closed loops. I think my working theory in it is that the guy who runs the organization in which has the time cops, I forget his name. Robertson, right. He's got the mustache. He's got that Men in Black look. He comes in at all these points and just redirects Ethan Hawke, or redirects them, guides them. And I think he's maintaining this sort of closed loop to make sure all of these events still happen. Because for whatever reason, perhaps this person works for this time organization that protects time. They're realizing that, okay, if this person doesn't do these things, the events are catastrophic and they're worse.
Yeah. Well, and Ethan Hawke is like, he says at one point, you realize you're born into this. this is the one person they can really assign as an agent to this type of job of time jumping and all this stuff. They have no connection, no life, no this is their life. Their life is this time loop. And the whole question comes back to,
because he's not only his own mother, but he's also his own father. It just keeps, the more you think about it, the more you're like, what? This movie is really fucked, because it's one of those movies that you can probably watch and immediately upon an ending rewatch it just to catch up on all those things, which I almost was gonna do, but it was late and I was tired. But it definitely warrants a rewatch so I can recatch all of these things that happen throughout it. And it's a testament to sci-fi movies. It really is, because if a sci-fi movie, if I watch a sci-fi movie and it doesn't make me at one point go, oh shit, it's not a sci-fi movie. It's not good enough for me.
And the question is, do we have the capacity to make different choices if we have the opportunity to? And this, Ethan Hawke is asking himself that through the whole film. He's the one that stole the baby. He stole himself and started the time loop over. And right before he's about to do it, he says, think of all the pain the baby is going to go through if I do it, and he still does it anyway. He continues to make the same choices.
I feel like he's compelled to make those choices because he knows it's for the greater good, and he has to. And he also knows that to stop this fizzle bomber, he has to. And we keep viewing the fizzle bomber as a person who's not in that closed loop. He's just this terrorist that he has to stop. Finding out that he himself is the fizzle bomber, and he becomes the fizzle bomber because he shoots the fizzle bomber. And it goes to show, the fizzle bomber too came off as a character that in the end, when he confronts him and says, hey, you're going to kill all these people. He says, well, look at all the people I've saved. I've saved thousands and hundreds here and thousands here. Being a time-traveling cop like I am, it's all justified in the end. But
by killing these people, I've saved so many thousands more, because this person died, this catastrophe didn't happen. And the funny thing is, if you listen to their conversation at the end with fizzle bomber Ethan Hawke, saying, if you shoot me, you'll turn into me. If you don't, we can be together again. It's this weird, it's almost like there's multiple people under the surface there, of they fell in love with a former version of themselves, and there's still that hope for having that person,
Yeah, and it really brings up the issue of, did he have a choice? Because if there's any point where the person has a choice, because I feel like the previous iterations of him were all kind of coaxed into or convinced or led in a direction of, do this because you have to, because this, they were all kind of tricked. Once it becomes Ethan Hawke, there's less trickery and it's more decisions. And it's like, I'm deciding to do these things. I'm making the choice to actively do these things, because he can pull himself out of it and say, I don't want to do that. Let's try something different. Because I think that moment where he does shoot the fizzle bomber is kind of the point where he has the most influence over his own decision. He can stop and not shoot him and just take a minute and figure it out. Instead, he shoots him. And it's almost like maybe he realizes all of these things are all connected. And he's always constantly realizing that it's all connected. And because of that, he's deciding that he doesn't have a choice. And it's not really about whether or not the fizzle bomber should die because of all the bad things that he's done or all the people he's killed. It's more about, do I really have a choice here, or is this predetermined? Is it my predestination to decide? I don't know. The movie title came up once or twice too, where they actually said predestination. But it was such a mind fuck. It's all just about destiny and making the choices, and can you make choices, or is it all predetermined? my question coming out of the movie was, why do all these things? And that's where Robertson came into it. That's why my Robertson theory is, why are all these things happening? Why not, what's the story that the filmmakers were trying to tell? Because it's cool to have a sci-fi explosion in your brain figuring out all these things, but why does it happen? Why does it exist? Why is there this closed loop? What is it preventing? And I think that's one thing that the film doesn't answer right away, or it doesn't even answer at all. It kind of hints at the idea that Ethan Hawke is just kind of along for this ride. He has to do this no matter what. And Robertson is running it. Who knows what Robertson's deal is? He could be preventing what if Ethan Hawke didn't shoot the Fizzle bomber? They team up, and those events lead to World War IV, III, whatever.
Well, you don't really know much about Robertson. Like, is Robertson from the future? Is Robertson from the past? When is Robinson from? Robertson. Did I say Robinson? I don't know what I said. But
Robertson, the guy who's running the show there was another guy with him too. But both of them were just kind of along. They were guiding them at the last moments. Like, he also said too at the beginning, like, you've done 2 of your missions already, and now it's time for your 3rd and final mission.
Mm-hmm.
And all that it just keeps going around in loops. I really feel like I'll have to watch it a second time to catch all those things. But who knows what Robertson's deal actually is, why he was doing the things he was doing. Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. Definitely a movie if you're into sci-fi, if you're into time travel, if you're into these weird, crazy concepts that got us talking for the last 25 minutes about it nonstop. Definitely give Predestination a watch. It's what year did it come out? 2014, I think.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Came out in 2014, so it's a fairly new movie. I like the time travel device because it's just like a violin case. It's not something too crazy. Like, usually there's like a watch or a device or a big contraption or a spaceship. This was just a violin case, bunch of numbers. I thought that was very interesting.
Something you can easily travel through all the time periods with.
Right, and not
inconspicuous, because the violin case can be old. It could be a hand-me-down violin. Doesn't matter.
One of the limitations of the movie too, that it set up a couple of rules in terms of like what was possible for time travel, is that a person could only time travel within a span of 53 years from the creation of time travel. Otherwise, the connection to where they were traveling from would dissipate and be destroyed. So I think it was 1981. So 53 years before that would be like 1934, and then like 2035 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, the characters are basically able to span throughout that time period, which I thought was really interesting, because that kind of does that work out to make the lifespan of Jane? Is that her lifespan? Is that it? Is that closed loop encompassing just this one person's life? I don't know. I was thinking about that too, where it's maybe the 1981 something happened that had to do with them. But Ethan Hawke's character did at one point say there are 11 of these time travel cops of some sort. So there's 11 closed loops out there, which is like, cool. Are there 11 closed loops because there's 11 other disasters that are being prevented constantly? Or
is it 11 various points of Ethan Hawke's life that are the 11, or are they 11 people just like Ethan Hawke who have no, like, that are in their own, you have no idea.
Yeah, who knows? He says there's 11, like he's met them all. Like there was a conference where they were all like, hi, you're number 1, right? Yeah, I'm number 6. But it's just a very interesting way to go about telling a very, like, I feel like somebody watched Back to the Future and they got really high and said, what if this wasn't funny? And kept writing until they were like, I've created so many loops. How do I make more time loops? And totally crazy. And at no point too, it's hard to make a time loop where you don't change the future. And this was an interesting scenario where you create a time loop, and it's not creating a parallel universe, and it's not changing the future. It's just all closed. It all makes sense. I think the first movie I saw that where they did that was 12 Monkeys with Bruce Willis.
I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah, at one point he goes back in time and he sees himself at an airport, and it's just like, that's it. That's the one closed loop, is he sees himself, and that's like seeing himself creates the loop, and you can't escape the loop. But this movie did that like 6 times. So credit to Predestination, credit to the writers, credit to the filmmakers, because sometimes too you can get a story like that and it's very complicated, very complex, very hard to tell, and the visuals of the story can mess it up, and it might make it more confusing, because it was a very confusing movie. It's very hard to follow unless you talk it out on a podcast. So I'm glad we're doing it. So credit to all the people attached to that movie. Very fun, very interesting. Thank you to Nick for suggesting it. I'm glad we got that very interesting movie. I feel like we have less to talk about with stuff like romantic comedies because there's not much more to explain. Like, they fell in love, yay! But
no, give them a shot. Hey, we talked about Goodbye Girl, and we had plenty to talk about. So
right, that's what I'm saying, is that we talked about this for a lot longer than we talked about that. But
right.
that's let's get into some current events. As we know, there's not too much going on at the moment because of COVID-19. However, we can bring up a few things. Obviously, we don't know when this is going to air specifically, but today, The Last of Us 2, which is a video game by Naughty Dog and PlayStation, the entire plot of the game, videos of how the game ends, and big plot points of the game all leaked online. And I thought it was interesting. Obviously, that's a video game, but I thought it was an interesting conversation to have on the podcast about spoilers and plots being leaked before the movie comes out. It's always a big concern with movies like Star Wars and Marvel and things like that, because these reoccurring movies, it's easy to say, what's the future of the story, and people predicting. I used to write for a website called Movie Pilot, where I would write speculation on what I think the next big movies are going to do. And, it's fun to debate those things. But when you find out the ending and then you just spoil it for other people.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. And I am guilty of it because I've done it before.
We've all spoiled something for someone. We just did for Predestination. If you haven't seen that film, we just throw in.
You can hear what we just said and still be like, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But,
fair point. But it's so frustrating, and it's hard with something like Last of Us is such a beloved video game because it's essentially like playing a movie. You get so invested in the characters that you play as, and there's been build up and talk for years about a sequel to this game, and they released the first teaser of the sequel like 3 years ago at this point. It's been like over a year since they said they were making one, and they gave us a little clip.
It should be said too that the reason it's been taking so long is because the developers are taking their sweet time because they want to make sure it's done right. However, they are overworking their people to a very significant degree. And the reason this leaked, the reason all these plot details and these videos were leaked, is because one of their workers got really fed up and said, fuck it, and just tried to out the company and ruin the company by putting out all the details of their biggest game just out there for anybody to see. And I don't know if this person's going to get in a lot of trouble for that, because obviously when you work on a project like this, you have to sign a bunch of NDAs, which are non-disclosure agreements, agreeing that you won't discuss the events of it before it comes out. But all the details have been released, and I think this person, whatever revenge they were trying to get out on this company for overworking him, or her. They succeeded because I didn't read the spoilers, but I read a lot of comments, and a lot of the comments are like, well, thanks for saving me $60. And now they're not going to buy the game because they know the story. There's no point.
I mean, they say they're not going to buy the game. They're going to buy the game.
Probably. I'm sure some people won't, but most people will still play.
It's just enduring disappointment at all this buildup, and it's not, you don't even get to experience it on your own now.
Right. And, it's the same can be said about the experience when you go to a movie theater and you're wowed for the first time. I'm usually a person that looks up all the spoilers. I love it. I just want to know. And then when you get to the movie theater, though, it dampens the experience a little bit because you already know. There's no shock value to it.
That's one of the reasons why I'm really not that into watching Game of Thrones at this point. I'm so late to the party on it that all of the huge spoilers have all been ruined for me. So there's no surprise factor. I cannot live through that experience as all of my friends did, being shocked and surprised. And
yeah, it's something, especially with TV shows too. It's hard because when TV shows are coming out every week, like I call my sister every week when we talk about Westworld because the season 3 of Westworld is currently coming out. And it's fun to talk about in the moment, but if I don't watch Westworld and 2 weeks go by and she keeps watching it and then she calls me to talk about it and I can't talk about it, like I haven't seen it yet, it ruins the experience. You have to be like on top of it in the moment of it. Game of Thrones was definitely one of those shows. Westworld's definitely one of those shows. It's tricky. And movies too, because if you don't see a movie for a very long time, like I just said before, well, Nick and us were talking before the movies, before the podcast began, that I haven't seen Close Encounters, and he yelled at me, scorned me, because I've never seen it. There's so many movies, and I'm gonna watch movies, but it's hard to see everything,
Yeah, it's not going to be possible. But I think, especially nowadays, with how connected we are with, internet, social media, everything, things are going to get ruined, and it's this whole new kind of piece of leverage that people have now. And there's so much content to take in that there's no way you can take it all in. There's no way you can experience all of it. There's just too much. Unless we're in quarantine and we have nothing else to do, then you can't take in the amount of content that's out there. So something is going to get ruined.
That's also not true because I'm just rewatching all of the shows I used to watch. So
which what I said at the beginning. That's exactly what I was doing.
It all comes full circle. Another closed loop. It's good as well that The Last of Us Part 2, Naughty Dog has gone and deleted a lot of the videos that leaked. It seems like they took a lot down. However, the pressure now, because of the spoilers, has been put on the studio. I think PlayStation stepped in and said, all right, Naughty Dog, we were giving you all the time you needed to get this game done because it's been delayed multiple times. They're like, screw it, now this bad press is like, we need to put this game out. So now the game is coming out June 19th, 2020, which has me excited. I'm hoping we're not still locked inside and quarantined at that time, but if we are, guess what I'm going to be doing? Playing that game.
Yeah, we won't be recording podcasts at that time. I will be playing video games.
It'll be in between save sessions where we will record this podcast. But yeah, man, don't spoil stuff. Spoiling is bad. Another thing that is bad is our next current event we can talk about is the next two current events, I guess, are UK related, but I guess the world of filmmaking, and I'm sure America is going to follow suit. UK traffic to film and TV piracy sites is up 60%, meaning people are pirating movies like crazy. Everyone's locked inside. Everyone's trying to watch shows and movies. Nobody wants to pay for Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or whatever else they got. So they're just pirating them and downloading them illegally. Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising to me at all that people are doing it. I have done it myself, and I felt shitty about downloading a movie that I didn't pay for. but the fact that it's going up that significantly is just, especially right now, it's like kicking the movie industry while it's down, because these filmmakers, they work so hard on these movies, they put them out, and then people to download them illegally, especially now when they can't work on things to keep producing and keep making money, it's really like kicking them while they're down. It's a perfect analogy.
Yeah. It's, I mean, you know, I can understand while you're home and, you know, you're stuck in quarantine, you're trying to find things to occupy your time. Obviously, there's a lot of content out there and there's a lot of stuff that you can watch, but that's not really the way to go about it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who've lost their jobs because of COVID-19, productions that got shut down. And it's not just, you know, the companies that are losing millions of dollars. It's, you know, it's the PAs on set who live, you know, freelance job to freelance job and now don't have that money coming in, and anything you can do to support the industry is what you should be doing instead of, you know, but I can see the other side of the coin too. People are stuck at home and some people don't have unemployment benefits. I mean, I don't know what it's like over in the UK, but, you know, stuck at home, not being able to spend $10 on, you know, a rental on a new film that's coming out on Amazon Prime, you know, or whatever. It's a crappy situation all the way around.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of what's going on overseas, we can get into our final current event. How the multi-billion-dollar UK film and television industry are creating robust protocols for production after lockdown. This is a report according to Deadline. The last report I didn't say was actually according to The Guardian. This one about how the film industry is going to come back after COVID blows over. They're starting to make plans. They're starting to build basically like a workbook of what they're going to do to prevent people from getting sick or contaminated with coronavirus, with COVID-19, while working on film sets, because the production budget in the UK surged to $4.7 billion last year, which is a 16% increase from the previous year. Essentially, that just means every film that was put out, including television shows as well, in general, the production budget for stuff coming out of the UK was $4.7 billion, which is a sizable investment to have COVID just kind of kick you down while you threw in $4.7 billion and then COVID made it impossible to move forward on those investments. So I understand them planning to come back and restart rolling cameras and getting crews out working because these investments need to happen. Yeah. I mean, do you think it's too early for them to...
I mean, they have to try and make some sort of plan for how they come back and how they do it safely. But the thing is, like, we're still learning stuff about the coronavirus. We're learning new things every single day. This virus isn't like anything that we've ever seen before. It's, you know, there's no proof that people who have had it have an immunity and won't get it again. It's causing strokes in young people, which is something new that they just found out, that they're saying it's attached to, you know, the pollution in the air. There's so much stuff that we're learning that I don't know if we're not anywhere close to getting rid of a lockdown or quarantine. If you really can make a plan that's going to be feasible to put into place. I mean, it's based off of certain ideas that we have about the coronavirus and how it spreads. And if we're learning new things every day, I mean, how are you supposed to put makeup on an actor for a film if you can't get 6 feet, you know, if you have to keep social distancing? How are you, like, there's going to be just so much as far as like contact tracing and, you know,
I think they're also going to have to get tested. You have to get a test before you're allowed closer than 6 feet to somebody. And if everyone gets tested and they all prove to not have it, that's great. But that's day one. Day two, someone could have gone and brushed up against a substance or person that has it. And then the next day they walk in the film set. Oh, they got tested yesterday, so they're good. and they're not.
I know.
They're
All
contaminated.
of this, like, you can just take their temperature, but if you're asymptomatic, that's not a good, determination. It's going to be so difficult to open things back up again and to get back into the swing of things of filming and doing productions, whether it's television and film, whether it's theater.
Well, Georgia reopened back up. Georgia down south opened back up, and that's a whole subject for debate, because not only is Georgia just another state in America, but they're probably the third biggest state in terms of filming and television production. But outside of California and New York, Georgia's pretty up there. Most notably known for like The Walking Dead. They filmed the entire show down in Georgia. They opened back up, and within a couple of days, they already have 500 new cases or more. And I'm sure it's just going to keep going up, because that's 500 confirmed cases in a couple of days. So, I mean, if they reopened up and it's that bad, it's probably not a good sign for us here in New York.
Yeah. But I mean, there's definitely, like, I think it's smart for people to start trying to make a plan for how do you move forward when you get out of here, because you don't want to just spend all this time in quarantine, twiddling your thumbs, and then you get out there and you have no plan for how to move forward safely. Just like that, exactly like that, Jim.
Planning is definitely the way to go if we don't have a proper plan for how to reapproach the film industry, because if we go back to the same normals that we, were exercising when we got into this mess, everyone's just going to get sick again. But it's also hard to say that $4.7 that the UK invested, $4.7 billion that they invested, should just go to waste. So it's hard to, just drop all that. I'm sure the American film industry is injected even more, and that's just UK. We're talking about the UK here, but when it comes to the United States, I'm sure that their budget for film and television production is much higher, and all that money is just going to go to waste. And the problem that creates is that these investors sunk all this money in, and they're going to lose it, and they're going to be very put off on the idea of promoting or investing in other movies. So a lot of movies are going to have an even harder time getting funding, even big Hollywood productions, because those are the guys losing the most money, because they're putting in the most money and they're getting zero, nothing.
Yeah.
So it's tough for everybody all around, tough for people on medium levels of filmmaking, lower levels of filmmaking, because anyone you approach for funding is in the same situation where they can't work and they can't create more money through the entertainment industry. But at least we're all not time traveling and creating ourselves in horrible loops like in Predestination. So there's
correct. Right.
That's how I view this entire crisis. If there's not like an eye patch version of me from the future that comes back in time to say, you messed up, you really shouldn't do this right now, you're about to make a bad decision, I think I'm all right, unless time travel doesn't exist and we're really dying. But as long as a future version of me doesn't come back in time to tell me how bad I fucked up, I probably did okay.
I'll take that as a win.
Right. Well, I think that's a great enough place to leave it as any. Thank you guys for tuning into the AFC podcast. You can like, you can comment, you can subscribe. Please stay tuned for future episodes.
Thank you to Nick Ferracamo for joining us today and sharing with us his choice Predestination and everything about Cinema Veritas. We'll put up all the links and everything so you can follow Cinema Veritas, as well as all of our links. And for the AFC podcast, I'm Victoria Fragnito.
I'm Jim Galizia. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.